And welcome back. Now, the National Energy Regulator of South Africa, Nersa, has agreed to an 18.65% increase in electricity tariffs effective from the 1st of April this year. Now, Eskom had applied for a 32% tariff increase for the 2023-24 financial year, which starts in April. In the same tariff application, the cash-strapped power utility also applied for a further 22.52% increase for the 2024-2025 financial year. Nersa has granted Eskom a 12.74% tariff increase, and Regulator Member for Electricity Regulation, Nhlanhla Gumede, says that the decision to increase tariffs was a tough one given the financial constraints consumers are facing. However, given the rolling blackouts and the difficult operating environment that Eskom is currently facing, an increase was mandatory. So joining us now to further discuss this and hopefully unpack some of the thinking behind all of this is energy expert Ruse Moleshe. Thanks so much for your time this morning, Ruse, and for speaking to us here on Morning Live.
Thank you, Sakina. Thank you to the viewers. Good morning.
Now, Ruse, first and foremost, I mean, most South Africans were watching this with great anticipation. And while 32%, seemed as though this was something from outer space, even the 12.74% that was granted is still massive for South Africans who are already cash-strapped.
Correct, Sakina. Even the 18.65% for 2023-2024, and as you correctly point out, 12.74% of for 2024-2025 is massive. However, Nersa is stuck between a rock and a hard place, mainly because for production of electricity, in terms of the law, Eskom is supposed to be reimbursed, and that should come from us, the consumers of electricity. So they have no choice. There is a methodology that they have to follow to be able to decide whether Eskom should be granted whatever it is that they are granted.
Well, that is the crux of the matter, though, isn't it, Ruse? Because Eskom has to be reimbursed. But reimbursed by whom? You would imagine all consumers of electricity. And this is not a level playing field by any stretch of the imagination. There are South Africans who are paying for electricity, and there are South Africans who are simply not paying for electricity. And unfortunately, those who are paying are actually the ones who will be bearing the brunt of this increase, as they have been all along.
Yes, correctly. Ideally, there should be efficiencies in the collection of collections from municipalities, from certain communities. But we know that the reality is different, where some of the consumers don't pay, and also there are those that illegally tap into the electricity, and that increases our problems immensely.
So, what would Nersa's responsibility be in a situation such as this? And I hear them, saying that they have taken into account the high cost of living. But as far as the situation that people are not paying for consumption goes, how should Nersa, or can they, as a juristic entity, even enter that space to try and see what's happening there, and whether Eskom is doing enough to actually recoup that money?
It's a tough one, Sakina. Firstly, Nersa must take into, when they are looking at whether to increase to allow an increase by Eskom of electricity prices, they look at various elements. The key drivers are primary energy. In this case, it's the power they buy from the independent power producers. It's operational costs. In terms of those operational costs, that includes efficiencies. So Eskom should be a prudent and efficient and an efficient supplier of electricity. We know that with the coal-fired power fleet that is not performing below par, that is not the case. So, but where Nersa decides to adjust whatever it is that Eskom is asking for, they have to do so methodically. They can't just say because you are not getting. They have to provide evidence that Eskom has not been efficient in their ability to collect whatever revenues they are supposed to collect. And if they cannot prove that, then it's very difficult for them to just say willy-nilly. You know that there have been a number of court cases where Nersa has gone to court to be able to say we should be given this, and indeed they have won those cases.
So if we look at that, how effective Eskom has been at revenue collection, we do know that at least in the last couple of years, they have ramped up that collection service from municipalities and other entities owing monies to Eskom. However, the expenditure is still way above what it should be. Fruitless and wasteful expenditure still right up there. And that cost is passed on to the consumer. Not fair. Not fair, Ruse.
Yeah, so in fact, Nersa, I think they agree with you in that score. I know that Nhlanhla Gumede mentioned, for instance, that the energy availability factor for the coal-fired power station has been relatively low. In the past, it was around 72%. It has been reduced quite significantly. The cost of diesel has increased significantly. The diesel or open cycle gas turbines are used very inefficiently. In fact, they use the word abused, because they are supposed to be used for emergencies. They are supposed to be used for peaking periods, but that is not the case. So in general, that is what Nersa should also be looking at. And that is why in certain instances, they did adjust, and we are not getting a 32% increase, mainly because there are some adjustments that Nersa had to do. They also did put in some conditions to say Eskom should not be running the open cycle gas turbines at very high load factors. They should reduce them by half to 6% rather than the current 12%. So it's a complex issue, yeah.
It is very complex, but I want to know, Ruse, for those consumers who actually feel aggrieved about what is happening at the moment with regard to Eskom, with regard to electricity provision, and of course the increases. What is, the avenue that consumers can actually embark on to make sure that those, and I'm talking now for those consumers who actually are paying and who feel like they are subsidizing everybody who's not paying in South Africa, what recourse is there for them through Nersa to actually go and have their voices heard?
The way that consumers can participate in the process of granting of increase by Nersa to Eskom is through the consultation process. That consultation process takes place before the actual granting of whatever the percentage of an increase that is. So that is the avenue. I know it's not what you are asking in terms of complaining, but that's the avenue. You provide your input, you provide your evidence. Eskom and Nersa takes that into account if it's relevant, but there is no specific avenue where you just complain about how high the costs are. You have to provide your own information to say, here, Eskom should not be getting A, B, C, D, and F. This is my evidence. And that's taken into account in the whole consultation process for a hearing of increases of electricity prices.
So if aggrieved consumers do not have an avenue to basically ask for some form of arbitration from Nersa, does this mean that the only avenue open to them would be to embark, for example, on a civil suit against, who would it be? The energy regulator, Eskom, both, government? How would that work?
Yeah, that's very difficult because what is happening is that there is what they call MYPD, with the multi-year price determination methodology. That methodology is regulated in law. The Electricity Regulation Act, there's a specific way in which Eskom can assess, Nersa assesses Eskom. Yes, Eskom is supposed to be an efficient producer of electricity, and where there are inefficiencies, then the adjustments are made accordingly. So an avenue, I guess, would be to approach the courts, but Sakina, is very difficult because you have to have evidence for exactly what area do you think that Eskom is being provided for an increase where it is unfair. So it has to be very specific. This is why Nersa, taken to court by Eskom, has struggled in the past with some of the judgments being in favor of Eskom.
Now, Ruse, do you think that this cash injection or this tariff increase that has been granted now will actually boost the power utilities' need to be able to keep the lights on?
I think that taking into account what the Minister of Finance has said with respect to handling the debt that Eskom, about 398 or so billion rand of debt that Eskom has, that together with a cost-reflective tariff should be able to help Eskom. But Eskom is plagued by a whole lot of challenges. One of the things that Nersa mentioned, for instance, was the maintenance of the coal-fired power plants, where they are saying some of the maintenance funding has been used for other expenditure rather than making sure that these plants are working according to what they are supposed to. So it's very, very difficult to say that there will be an immediate impact because there's been a reliability and unreliability in terms of unplanned outages when it comes to Eskom. We know that the new board is working tirelessly to try and find ways of operational efficiencies. Hopefully that will yield results. But again, we also need new capacity to come in to help Eskom. So I suppose it will help to an extent, but there are a number of other issues that have to be done to make sure that eventually there is an impact on the Eskom system, unfortunately.
So if we look at the multi-year price determination, we're looking at a 33.7% increase over 2 years, Ruse. You know, what do cash-strapped South Africans do? Because we are essentially being asked to pay more for unreliable electricity supply. So we have less electricity, but paying more for it.
Yeah, that's the sad, but the difficult part for Nersa as well, again, is that if you are not granting Eskom what they require when you are facing load shedding, what does that do to the economy? What does that do to South African? Really, South Africans at this point are caught in between a rock and a hard place. You have to make sure that you provide a cost-reflective tariff so that Eskom has the necessary funds to be able to do what they need to do. At the same time, you're not getting a service that is supposed to be at a level where there are strong efficiencies. So I really empathize with the consumer in South Africa today. This is not where we should be. It's very much unfair. Unfortunately, it's our reality.
A reality, but should we have to accept it? That's, you know, a rhetorical question. But if anyone wants to answer it, at Morning Live SABC. Thank you so much for your time this morning, Ruse. And that was energy expert Ruse Moleshe speaking to us about the National Energy Regulator of South Africa, Nersa, agreeing to an 18.65% increase in electricity tariffs, and that will be effective from the 1st of April this year.